As the 2020 NASCAR season prepares to resume this weekend, we're going to look at this year's free agent class, and I'm going to give you all my complete silly season predictions. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. One of my favorite episodes we do every year, it's the predictions episode, the silly season predictions episode. And this year specifically is the most excited I've ever been to do one of these videos because this year, going into 2021, the number of free agents, the number of drivers who have kind of questionable contracts at the moment is unreal. The list of drivers who do have plans for 2021 set already is much shorter, but today we're looking at that long list of unknowns, of unpredictability, and we're gonna have a lot of fun today. But before we start talking about this, I quickly want to promote the Icebox Pickup Throwdown iRacing Truck Series. The fourth race of this series is this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time right here on this channel. Once again, I will be a part of the very talented Podium Esports broadcast team. Races at Worldwide Technology Raceway Gateway this week. Last week, Kyle Busch joined the competition, joined the action. It's been a great series so far. Real racing, of course, is right around the corner, but before we get to real racing this weekend, why not another iRacing event for all your favorite truck and Xfinity Series drivers to participate in? So that's happening 8 p.m. Eastern Time this Thursday. Hope to see a lot of you there. All right, but let's get to these predictions. So like I said at the beginning, there are a lot of potential free agents this year. Now, the one thing that makes NASCAR different than a lot of other major stick and ball sports is that most of the contracts in NASCAR are kept very quiet. A lot of times drivers will sign multi-year deals, but they never say if that's for 2 years or for 5 years. You never really know. So there's a lot of guesswork that goes into predicting what a lot of NASCAR Cup Series drivers' contracts look like. And of course, as we've seen just in the last year or so, buyouts are possible or sudden swaps are possible, like what happened to Chris Buescher and Ricky Stenhouse at the end of last season with Roush and JTG. Like, there are always weird little details in these contracts that the public usually doesn't know about, but that's what makes these silly seasons always exciting and interesting, because you just never know what's going to happen. Now, this is the short list of drivers who it is believed have their 2021 plans completely locked up and set. Chase Elliott, Kurt Busch, Kevin Harvick, Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., Austin Dillon, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. That's it. What, 9 names I just read? Out of, 30, 35 full-time drivers? Now, not everybody else is necessarily in a contract year. There's a good number of drivers where it's just not quite known what their contract situation is. I'm thinking about a lot of the rookies, like Tyler Reddick, John Hunter Nemechek, Cole Custer, some of the rookie drivers. We don't really know what their contract situation is, but at least in most of their cases, I think it's safe to assume they're going to stay in the same ride they're in right now, but we just don't know because that's not been made public. I do think with there being so many free agents out there, and of course so many unknowns already within this current NASCAR season and next year's NASCAR season, I do think that's going to lead a lot of the team owners to kind of go with what they know. Teams are faced with so many uncertainties right now. I think that's going to lead a lot of team owners to end up re-signing drivers who they currently have driving for them this year. I think there are going to be a few very notable changes, but I do think a lot of drivers that are maybe in contract years or kind of their contract situations are kind of unknown, I think most team owners will be incentivized to stick with what they know and are comfortable with for 2021, just because this season's been such a mess with the suspension, the hiatus, and who knows what's going to happen going forward. All right, that's enough. Let's actually get into the predictions. I'm going to start with Chip Ganassi Racing. So Kurt Busch, I mentioned him earlier, he's locked up. He signed an extension. Monster Energy's with him. He's going to be with Chip Ganassi Racing for at least the next couple of years. But talking about that 42 car, I know he hasn't even raced yet this year, but I highly doubt Matt Kenseth will be returning to the 42 car full-time next season. I mean, one of the main reasons he agreed to come back and race full-time this year is because the Cup Series schedule is going to be so condensed. They're going to fit a lot of racing into about 7 months as opposed to 9 or 10 months. And Matt Kenseth is older. He has a bunch of young kids at home. He doesn't want to be out on the road away from his family for long stretches of time. This year, because a lot of the races are close to home and it's going to be condensed into a shorter amount of time, I think everything added up perfectly for Matt Kenseth to come back this year. But next year, with everything kind of hopefully going back business as usual, I don't see Matt Kenseth returning to drive the 42 car unless he wins a championship this year. Maybe then he'd come back. I don't know. But I don't see that happening. I believe Ross Chastain will be the driver of the 42 car next year. I think the only reason Ross Chastain is not the current driver of the 42 is because of his commitment to running for an Xfinity championship with Kaulig Racing. Of course, Chastain still has a relationship with Chip Ganassi. I believe he still has a contractual relationship with Chip Ganassi Racing. Nutrient Solutions seemingly has come on as kind of a specific partner for Ross Chastain, which makes sense. They're agriculture. He's a watermelon farmer. That's his whole brand. So I think Ross Chastain to the 42 next year is a no-brainer at this point. And it's going to be good for that team because Ross Chastain is very talented, but he's also a bit over-aggressive at times. And I think teaming him up with a veteran, a champion, and Kurt Busch, I think he's going to help coach Chastain. I think Chastain's going to learn a lot very quickly next year in that 42 car, so I think it's going to be good for the future of Chip Ganassi Racing putting Chastain in the 42 next year. Let's briefly move over to Toyota. So Joe Gibbs Racing, their lineup for next year is pretty much set. Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr. As far as I know, they are not going anywhere. Sponsors are probably going to mostly stay the same. The question for the second year in a row is with that 20 car. Erik Jones signed a 1-year extension last year, and once again, he is a free agent at the end of this season. Much like last year, some people are wondering whether or not Christopher Bell will be brought over from Leavine Family Racing, and maybe Bell will be put in the 20 car in 2021, especially if Jones struggles this year. I don't think that's happening. I believe Erik Jones will still be in the 20 car beyond this season. I don't really know what Joe Gibbs is thinking here, but I do know that he has a strong attachment to Erik Jones. He's been with him basically since his NASCAR beginnings. I'm purely thinking from if I was in Joe Gibbs' situation, I would not make the mistake of letting Erik Jones walk away. He's only 23 years old, but you remember Joey Logano was 22 when Gibbs let him walk away. I'll bet they kind of regret that now. I still feel very confident about Erik Jones and his future. I mean, just in his first 2 years in the 20 car, he's made the playoffs both years. He's won a race each of the first 2 years. He won the Busch Clash this year. I mean, he's obviously the 4th best driver at Joe Gibbs Racing, but the other 3 drivers are all future Hall of Famers. So Erik Jones, yeah, he has room to grow, but the potential is clearly there, and I truly believe Erik Jones is going to be a playoff driver forever, and I think he is going to be a championship contender one day, and I think Gibbs would be making a mistake letting Erik Jones walk away this quick. So moving over to the satellite Toyota team, Leavine Family Racing, I think Christopher Bell will stay in the 95 for 1 more year. Now, it is known about Bell's contract that he signed a 1-year deal with Leavine, and the second year is supposed to be with Gibbs. At least that's what he signed last year. Now, of course, his current contract is still basically a Gibbs contract. He's kind of on loan to Leavine in a lot of ways, similar to what Gibbs did with Erik Jones in 2017 when they loaned him to Furniture Row Racing. That's kind of what is happening now. Christopher Bell made it very clear last year that he loves Toyota. He doesn't want to leave Toyota, so I think he will stay with Leavine Family Racing, even if that's all that's available to him. I don't think he's going to try to test the water somewhere else. I don't think he's allowed to. I think he's locked in with Toyota right now for another year. And since I think they're going to keep Jones in the 20 car, I think Bell will stay in the 95 for another year, basically another year loaned to Leavine Family Racing. I like Christopher Bell a lot too. When I say such good things about Erik Jones, that doesn't mean that I think he's way better than Christopher Bell. I think they are very comparable right now. I do think Christopher Bell's driving style, coming from dirt, coming from driving loose, really high horsepower race cars, does not suit the current intermediate rules package that NASCAR is running. So I do think Bell is at a slight disadvantage there, but I do believe Christopher Bell has a bright NASCAR future. He's off to a terrible start this year, his rookie year. He's 32nd in points after 4 races. He's behind Ryan Newman, who has only raced 1 race this year. But he obviously has plenty of time to turn it around. I still think he's a good pick for Rookie of the Year this year, but I believe he'll still be with Toyota and Leavine Family Racing in 2021. I think Joe Gibbs is hoping that he can keep Bell and Jones in his control for another couple of years, both of them at the same time, because, you look at Martin Truex Jr., maybe Denny Hamlin, don't have more than a few years left, maybe less. I'm sure Gibbs wants to have at least one, if not both of those drivers ready to kind of fill that seat once those drivers eventually retire. Briefly, the last Toyota team, the 96 Gaunt Brothers Racing, I think Daniel Suarez stays in that car for another year. Obviously, that's a new team. They're trying to run full-time this year. Kind of got off to a rocky start, but Daniel Suarez sounds like he's committed to helping bring this organization to the top, help build them up a little bit more. And also, let's be honest, I don't think Suarez has a whole lot of other Cup Series teams knocking on his door right now, so I think he's going to stay with the 96 next year. Let's talk about RCR. Austin Dillon, his contract situation isn't super well known, but most people believe he will be back for at least 1 more year. Of course, his grandfather, Richard Childress, owns the team, so I don't expect Austin Dillon to go anywhere in 2021. Tyler Reddick is a rookie this year in the 8 car, but he's already had a couple standout performances, especially Phoenix, the last race before the suspension began. I think Tyler Reddick stays in the 8 car for next year. I mean, he's a rookie this year, and obviously had a lot of success in the Xfinity Series. I don't think RCR is going to let him walk away anytime soon. Let's talk about the 13 car, Germain Racing. Ty Dillon's driven it the last several years. Again, I think Ty Dillon will stay in this car. Germain Racing is sort of affiliated with RCR, so again, Richard Childress, his grandson. Let's just say for what it is. Geico has now stepped up as one of the premier partners of NASCAR, so they're not going anywhere. They seem to be getting their money's worth sponsoring NASCAR, so I think that 13 car will be perfect for Ty Dillon in 2021. Keeping with Chevys, let's talk about Hendrick Motorsports. Fan favorite Hendrick Motorsports, because they have a few question marks going into next season. Chase Elliott's a lock. As far as I know, his contract's not expiring anytime soon. He's got sponsorship. Chase Elliott will be in the 9. William Byron, very little is known about his contract, but he's young, has some funding. They paired him up with Chad Knaus, which seems to to me at least, tells me that they're very invested in his driving future. So I think Byron will stay in the 24 car next year. But of course, that's not guaranteed, but I think he will. Let's talk about the 88 car for a moment, because a lot of Alex Bowman fans have been very concerned the last few months, mainly due to lack of sponsorship. With Nationwide leaving in the offseason, they've really had to kind of scramble to fill some of his races. And it sounds like Rick Hendrick pulled some of his car dealership strings to get Chevrolet involved, and that's why you have a bunch of Chevy partners on the paint scheme on the car for a bunch of races this year. I'm not sure how the money is changing hands there. I don't know how valuable that sponsorship really is to Hendrick Motorsports, but it is there. It is something notable. Sponsorship is definitely a question, but I believe Alex Bowman is just too dang good for Rick Hendrick to let him go. He won that race in Fontana earlier this year. I believe Alex Bowman is a legit championship threat this year. I mean, legitimately. I'm not just making that up. He is going to be a contender when we get to October and November, without a doubt in my mind, and I just don't see Rick Hendrick letting that talent walk away. Alex Bowman is one of the low-key most talented young drivers NASCAR has right now, and not enough people have talked about it the last year or two, but it's finally coming to light, I believe. Sponsorship is a question, but I think they'll figure it out. It's Hendrick Motorsports, man. The brand almost sells itself. I think they'll figure it out and keep Bowman in the car. The bigger question now turns to the 48, because Jimmy Johnson sounds like he's still planning on retiring from full-time racing at the end of this year, which means that 48 car, the famous 48 car, will be open for the first time in ever. And this is probably going to be the most highly coveted seat available this offseason, because it comes with full sponsorship from Ally. Of course, Hendrick is a historically great race team, state-of-the-art facilities. Who wouldn't want to drive that 48 car? It's been reported that Rick Hendrick would prefer to put a veteran driver in the 48 next year as opposed to, say, a rookie or a younger guy, which in my opinion erases any chance of like Daniel Hemrick or Noah Gragson from down in the Xfinity Series of getting that ride. Don't think that happens. I made a video about this a couple months ago, so those of you who've kept up with the channel consistently probably know where I'm going with this, but my pick for the 48 car in 2021 might come as a shock to some of you. I think it's Brad Keselowski. Over the last couple months, though, I have seen a few more people kind of join the Keselowski bandwagon, so I don't think I'm as crazy sounding as I was a couple months ago when I first made this prediction, but I'm sticking with it. I think all the writing on the wall points to 2012 champion Brad Keselowski leaving Team Penske and joining Rick Hendrick. But let me back up my argument once again. I mean, Roger Penske's already re-signed Ryan Blaney, but he reportedly hasn't had any conversations with Brad Keselowski yet. I mean, Brad Keselowski's a champion, your veteran driver, the elder statesman of your team. Feels like he should be getting some sort of respect, and you've already given Blaney an extension. Why have you not even talked to Keselowski? Miller Lite has significantly decreased their support of that race team. In the offseason, Paul Wolfe was swapped out for Jeremy Bullins, so it kind of became clear to me early on that maybe Brad Keselowski's not the priority for Team Penske at the moment. I remember back during a speed week at Daytona, Keselowski was upset with his teammate Joey Logano for Logano's aggressive blocks. I just think it's run its course. I think Keselowski's been with Team Penske for almost a decade now. He's won races, he's won a championship. I think it's run its course. Yes, Keselowski's had a bit of a rocky history with Rick Hendrick in the past. I mean, remember, what was it, over a decade ago, when Brad Keselowski was passed over for a cup ride, which was instead given to aging Mark Martin. It's clear in past interviews that Keselowski was a little bitter about that for many years, but right now, Brad Keselowski has what Rick Hendrick wants, and Rick Hendrick has what Brad Keselowski wants. Keselowski is a veteran, he's a champion, he's going to come in and help coach a lot of the young drivers, because Rick Hendrick's got still Bowman, Byron, Elliott, young drivers in that team right now. And on the other side, Rick Hendrick has fast race cars, which seem to be taking a big step forward this year. Those first few races, Chevy looked pretty darn good before the hiatus. And of course, they have full sponsorship from Ally, who I'm sure would like a veteran driver who's going to get them results. Brad Keselowski is that guy, so that's what I'm saying. I think Hendrick's got what Brad Keselowski wants, and Keselowski has what Rick Hendrick wants. So it's a match made in heaven right now. I think it's time they make amends for their past bitterness, perhaps, and I think it happens. I think Keselowski goes to the 48 this year. So if Brad Keselowski leaves the 2 car, who takes his place in the Blue Deuce? Well, it's not really blue anymore. The Deuce. I believe it will be a rookie in that car next year. I think Austin Cindric will get the promotion from the Xfinity Series and will make his Cup Series rookie debut in 2021. Cindric has had kind of an up and down Xfinity career. Last year was a pretty solid year. He had 2 wins, I believe finished 6th in the points. And this year, I know there are only a few races in, but under the traditional points, I believe he's 3rd in the standings. So he's been pretty solid the last couple of years. But let's not kid ourselves. Austin Cindric is inevitably going to end up driving for Penske in the Cup Series one day. His father, Tim Cindric, is what, the president of the company? President of Team Penske? I'm sorry, let's just be honest. Austin Cindric will be 22 years old when next season starts, so pretty young, but like I'm kind of hinting at, it was only a matter of time before he got a Cup Series opportunity. I think with Keselowski in a contract year, leaving for Hendrick, at least that's my prediction, I believe this is the perfect time for Austin Cindric to make his Cup debut. Can you hear my dog barking? Everything else at Team Penske will stay the same. Also, JTG Doherty, I think Ryan Preece will stay in the 37 next year. I don't see any reason why that's going to change, but his contract situation is unknown. Bubba Wallace, I believe he will stay in the 43 car as well. Richard Petty seems to like it, but more importantly, Worldwide Technology seems to very much like him, and as long as he's getting some funding from them, I don't see any reason why Richard Petty Motorsports would want to let him go. Roush Fenway Racing might have some question marks this offseason. We'll start with the 6 car, which Ryan Newman is going to be getting back in this weekend at Darlington after being injured after Daytona, so that's great to see. Ryan Newman's contract is, again, pretty much unknown. Most people believe he signed a 2-year deal, perhaps with a 1-year option, which that 1-year option would be 2021, so it's kind of going to come down to whether or not Roush Fenway wants to keep Newman in the car next year. I don't see why they wouldn't, especially if last year's performance is any indication. He put that car in the playoffs and, again, came just one blown chicane at the Roval away from advancing to the round of 12. Newman overachieved last year. Obviously, this year he's coming off of injury. Not sure how that's going to affect his performance in 2020, but assuming he doesn't just absolutely suck, I don't see why Roush Fenway wouldn't pick up his option for 2021. So I think Ryan Newman will be back in that race car once again next year. And as far as the 17 is going, Chris Buescher, I believe, still has 1 year left on his deal, so I think he is locked in as well. But again, not entirely sure. I mean, remember, Buescher got traded in the middle of last season out of nowhere, so that's why I'm still not certain when I say Buescher will stay in the 17, but I think it's very likely. Another notable free agent is Matt DiBenedetto. He signed a 1-year deal with Wood Brothers Racing before the start of this season, and he's looked really good out of the gate here to start 2020. I personally believe he's going to make that 21 car look the best it's looked since Blaney drove it, and arguably I think he'll make it look better. If the first few races of this year are any indication, yeah, Matt DiBenedetto is going to take that car to the playoffs, and very real possibility they go deep into the playoffs this year. I'm not going to rule out possible championship contender in 2020. Assuming anything close to that happens this year, I don't see why the Wood Brothers would want to part with Matt DiBenedetto. He's a fan favorite, and I think he is proving this year that he deserves this opportunity in top equipment. I think Corey LaJoie stays in the 32 car. He sent that letter to Rick Hendrick as like a pitching himself for the 48, but with all due respect to Corey LaJoie, and I really like Corey LaJoie, we just haven't seen enough for anyone to give him a top Cup Series ride, especially given how competitive the rest of the free agent field for this year is. I like Corey a lot. He's a very solid, consistent driver, but I don't see him getting a top Cup ride next year. I think he stays with Go Fast. He has a strong relationship with them. Front Row Motorsports is a pretty big unknown. They laid off pretty much their entire workforce like a month ago. I assume they brought some of those people back to prepare for Darlington, but Michael McDowell, his contract situation, nobody knows. I really have no guesses when it comes to Front Row Motorsports. So I'm just going to say McDowell stays with the 34. I'll say Nemechek stays in the 38. He's a rookie. I would assume they'd give him another year, but I have I'm really just saying this because I don't know who they'd possibly replace them with. Just everything's an unknown at Front Row Motorsports, in my opinion. The last race team I have not talked about is Stewart-Haas Racing, so we'll wrap this up by going through that team really quick because they have some interesting contract situations over there. For starters, Kevin Harvick, he's locked up. He signed an extension. He's good to go. No worries there. Eric Almirola is a bit of a question. It is believed that he signed a 1-year contract last year, so he is supposed to be a free agent at the end of this season. I believe Eric Almirola will go as far as Smithfield will take him. But I will say every year continues to be more and more uncertain for Eric Almirola. Smithfield has been a loyal sponsor of his since his Richard Petty Motorsports days, so they have a great relationship. But I sometimes wonder how many mediocre seasons are they going to take before they start to back off some of their support. 2018 was a great year for Eric Almirola, but 2019 was a bit of a disappointment, in my opinion. I'm going to keep him in the 10 car for next year because I do believe Smithfield Foods will continue to support him, but Smithfield, they've kind of been in the news lately, and with this pandemic and everything affecting all sorts of businesses, I'm not sure how Smithfield may be affected, and that might change how they spend their sponsorship dollars for next year and beyond. So that's the concern for Eric Almirola, honestly, is how much support does Smithfield continue to give him? I'm going to assume they'll stick with him because they've stuck with him through everything. They stuck with him even when Richard Petty was publicly berating them, so I think Smithfield Foods' attachment to Eric Almirola is extremely strong. One of the more confusing ones. I don't know the history behind that partnership, but they really like Almirola. I think he stays in the 10 car. Cole Custer in the 41, he stays as well. Again, he's a rookie, like I said earlier. Too early to predict if he's going to have a good year or a bad year, where he's going from here. Nobody knows what his contract is. I think Cole Custer stays. I've saved the most interesting, perhaps, for last. Clint Bowyer is in a contract year for Stewart-Haas Racing in that 14 car. He is another big-name free agent set to hit the market this offseason, and I believe this is it for Bowyer. The writing has been on the wall the last couple months, but I think Clint Bowyer officially calls it after 2020. I think he will retire from full-time NASCAR racing at the end of this season, and I think he will immediately jump into the broadcast booth with Fox Sports and become a part of their team. In this past offseason, Clint Bowyer announced that he was going to be more involved in the Fox Sports broadcast. He was going to help call a lot of the Xfinity races for Fox Sports this year. And then, of course, when the Pro Invitational, the iRacing stuff started happening, who was the in-race reporter right there in the Fox studio? It was Clint Bowyer, of course. I wouldn't be shocked if he's already signed a long-term contract with Fox Sports, and that's part of why some of these other deals have happened. I think that's what's going to take. Clint Bowyer's a solid driver. He really is, but he's had a very up-and-down tenure with Stewart-Haas Racing. I would say disappointing in many ways. 2018, he got a couple wins, but 2017, he missed the playoffs. Last year was a disappointment. He's had an up-and-down career with Stewart-Haas Racing. He's had an up-and-down career overall, and it's gone on for quite a while. He's had a very long career. He's been in the Cup Series since, what, 06, 07? What was it? Yeah, his rookie year was 2006. So he's had a long and pretty successful racing career, but the iRacing Pro Invitational broadcast showed the world that broadcasting might be his true calling. So I would be excited to see Bowyer in the broadcast booth next year. So maybe this is just my wishful thinking, but I believe Bowyer retires at the end of this year and turns to Fox and becomes a broadcaster. So that leaves the 14 car wide freaking open. That's a top Cup Series ride. That is a borderline championship contending race car right there. There are a lot of good drivers currently in NASCAR in the lower series that I think could get promoted. I mean, I think about Chase Briscoe down the Xfinity Series. He's kind of been a Ford guy. He could very well be due for a promotion in the next year, but I'm not going with him. I am going with Kyle Larson. I think he makes his return to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2021, and I think it's going to be in a major way with Tony Stewart's Stewart-Haas Racing. And I mentioned Tony Stewart by name. I know he's only the co-owner. Gene Haas obviously has a huge say in who goes to these race cars and how operations work and everything. But Kyle Larson is obviously out of the sport right now because he used a racial slur and sponsors all left him. Team was forced to fire him. He's out of NASCAR right now. Not clear when he's going to be reinstated. We already know he's completed the sensitivity training that NASCAR mandated he complete, but it's unclear when they will reinstate him, make him eligible once again to compete in NASCAR, but I tend to believe that will happen before the end of 2020. But I don't think he's going to return to NASCAR, especially not the Cup Series this year. I think it's going to be 2021, and I think it will be with Stewart-Haas Racing. And I mentioned Tony Stewart because Tony Stewart has a history of dealing with controversies. Remember early on in Stewart's career, NASCAR forced him to take anger management courses back in like 2002. Of course, there was the tragic Kevin Ward incident of 2014, but Tony Stewart has a history of giving drivers a second chance, so to speak. I think about Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch had been kicked out of rides, suspended briefly by NASCAR, and he had off-the-track legal issues, and Tony Stewart took a chance on him, and Kurt Busch kind of rebuilt his image and rebuilt his career those few years he was with SHR. And I believe that team could do the same thing for Kyle Larson. Of course, there's the factor that Tony Stewart's a dirt guy, Kyle Larson's a dirt guy, so they already have a shared kinship in that sense. Tony Stewart said a lot of positive things about Larson's driving in the past, so I think before the controversy, before Kyle Larson got kicked out of NASCAR here, Larson to SHR was extremely likely. I think now it's going to be a little bit more unexpected, perhaps. I think people are going to look at drivers currently in NASCAR, in the Xfinity Series, maybe in the Cup Series, because there's a lot of free agents. I think people are going to forget about Larson for a minute, and then I think he's going to swoop in WWE style and steal the show, steal the spotlight, and he will be once again in NASCAR in a triumphant major way in 2021. Why is my dog barking? Can y'all hear her? Anyway, of course, we don't know when Larson will be reinstated by NASCAR, but it's reported that he completed sensitivity training. You know, other drivers like Bubba Wallace, Denny Hamlin have both said they believe Larson will be back in NASCAR at some point. And I believe it happens sooner rather than later. I think he gets the 14 car in 2021. But whew! These videos are always long, and this year was longer because we had a lot more question marks to discuss. But there you have it. Those are my complete 2021, I guess, NASCAR silly season predictions. Let me know which ones you agree with, which ones you disagree with. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of drivers I don't think are really going to be changing teams too much just because with so many uncertainties, so many different free agents, so many uncertainties just around the world and the business right now, I think a lot of race teams will be inclined to go with drivers they're comfortable with already. So I think there's 4 or 5 big changes that are going to happen this offseason, but probably not more than that. But let me know which ones you agree with, which ones you disagree with. I always look forward to reading your comments down in the comment section. But that's all I've got for this video. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe if you are new. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram. And a big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters. Couldn't keep doing this show without the support I get from each and every single one of you on Patreon. So thank you all a ton for going above and beyond to support me, support the show, support the channel. I couldn't do this without you guys, so I really, really deeply appreciate it. I'm so excited that NASCAR is returning this weekend. I'll have some more videos up between now and then, though, to kind of recap the suspension, the hiatus, also to preview what's to come. So a lot of content coming your way very soon on this channel. Thank you all for watching. I will see you again very, very soon. Have a great week, y'all.